talk about measurements of an individual for a manual wheelchair. You'll recall from the PowerPoint we talked about what's important is that the person is sitting on a firm, flat surface when you're doing these measurements, such as a plinth or one of the therapeutic treatment tables like we have in our lab. For the purposes of our video today, we're going to have the client seated in his manual wheelchair just so I can give you an idea about what these measurements look like. I'm going to be referring to the seating and mobility handout that I gave you and referred to as well in the lecture from last Monday. So, best tool to have is a small measuring tape that has a flexible ribbon. That allows you to get around aspects of the client to get a much more accurate measurement than a rigid measuring tape would. So we're going to start from top to bottom, and I'll show you some of the main measurements that we need to take. You don't have to worry about all the ones on the sheet, but I'll show you some of the ones that are really important to us. So I'm actually going to start, I'm going to work from bottom to top to show you some of the different ones that would be really relevant if you were going to get a chair for the therapist or for the client. So the first one we're going to do is seat to floor measurement. So that tells us how high off the ground the user needs to be. If the person is foot propelling, we would require a different measurement than if they were not propelling with their feet. So you can refer to the tables in the handout regarding that. So what we would do is have the person seated on a firm, flat surface with their feet sitting firmly on the floor. We would take the measuring tape. We always measure in inches, and we would measure from the base of the client's heel up to the popliteal fold, or in other words, the fold that's behind their knee. So in this case, I would be going from the heel on the floor, like this, all the way up until I reach the fold at the back of the knee, and that's your seat to floor measurement. If the client is not foot propelling, we have to add a few inches to account for the space from the bottom of their feet to the floor. The next measurement we need to know is seat depth. In order to do that, we go from the most posterior aspect of the client up to the popliteal fold again, or the back of the knee. That tells us how deep the cushion needs to be, keeping in mind that we don't want the back of the cushion rubbing on the back of the client's leg because that could create a pressure point and discomfort. If the client is foot propelling, we have to have about 4 finger widths of space between the back of their knee and the edge of the cushion to allow them to capture heel strike and toe off to be able to propel themselves. If they're not, then we want to have maximum contact on the back of the person's legs so that they have good pressure distribution and don't have any risk factors for skin breakdown. Okay, the next measurement we're going to look at is to the olecranon process. So this is your elbow. We'd be looking from the seat of the chair to the individual's olecranon process. So in this case, I would be taking my measuring tape from the base of the client's cushion, so right here, all the way to their olecranon process. And obviously it's a little bit challenging to do with the client seated in the chair, but this is the measurement you would need if the person had armrests. Okay, and the next measurement would be from the seat to the inferior angle of the scapula. So we would go from the top of the client's seat. We'd have to find the inferior border of their scapula and measure to the base of it. So the way that we do that is just by finding your bony landmarks. You find where the scapula is, palpate along till you find the inferior angle. Once you have that point, you can measure from the base of the seat to the angle. Now that's obviously really important for backrest height. That's particularly important for an individual that is a very active user that is hand propelling, because again, like I said in a previous video, we want the person to be able to freely move their arms. The next measurement that we would want for a backrest would be from the seat to the top of the client's shoulders. So now we're going from the top of the cushion all the way up to the highest point on the client's shoulders. Okay. I'm going to get you to turn around and face the camera. Perfect. So now we're going to look at a few more measurements from the front, and I'll give you some tips on how to do that. The big one would be seat width. So obviously we want to go from the widest aspect of the client from either side. A tip that I have in doing that, rather than trying to bend the tape around the client, put the tape between your 2 fingers, like this, and use your hands as a guide from either side of the client so that you can really capture the appropriate measurement. So we would go on either side to the widest point like this, and then I would be able to tell what my measurement is. So a standard wheelchair would be approximately 18 inches. This client's measurement from side to side is about 15 to 16 inches. The next thing that we might want to capture would be chest width. So we want to have an idea about the backrest, how wide it's going to be so that the client can actively get around and not be obstructed by the back. So again, we'd be looking from one side of the chest to the other with hands on either side. Okay, and then the last one would be shoulder width. So looking from this side of the client's shoulders to this side to have an idea about how wide we need that backrest to be. In this case, the client has quite a low backrest, so we're not concerned about this particular measurement. Okay, so the most important measurements for you guys would be seat to floor, the chair depth, the chair width, the height if armrests are required, and probably the backrest height and width. Otherwise, some of those other measurements are sort of extra and more for a user that's using a wheelchair for a longer period of time, or maybe has a customized wheelchair such as this one that we order on prescription and give all of those measurements to. We can have a quick chat about dump because I didn't mention that. So if the client turns to the side, I mentioned dump is about the measurement of the front of the chair versus the back of the chair. So if I wanted to know how much jump is in this chair, I would measure from the floor to the top of the leg, so 19 inches. Then I would go to the back end of the chair, same thing, measure from the floor, roughly 17 inches. So this chair probably has about 2 to 3 inches of dump on it. So that's measurement of a manual wheelchair.